Today is Monday, February 9th, 2026. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. The Super Bowl's over, and there were a lot of opinions on the halftime shows. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating. We'd appreciate that. You can email us as well. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Glad you're here with us as we're getting through the news of the day each and every weekday, bright and early. Joining me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell. A lot to get to on the podcast today, including on the focus story, a tragic death from a popular frontman.
Yeah, it's really sad. Brad Arnold from Three Doors Down passed away. We'll get into a little bit of his faith story.
All right, details on that coming up here in just a moment. Also on the main thing, a gospel star walks away from a powerful brotherhood after a divine warning. Now others are following. It's stirring some debate. CBN Charlene Aaron has more on that coming up on the main thing. All right, our sponsors for this podcast, Christian Solidarity International. When we talk about all the Christian persecution that's going on around the globe, you know, it can feel like it's happening on the other end of the world. It can feel very, very far away, but this is real stories impacting real people, and Christian Solidarity is on the ground helping in and share the story with you in Nigeria about militants storming a Christian village. They burn homes and drag families into a bush. Well, one specific case, a young mom was taken captive and she was beaten, forced to cook for her captors. She was separated from her children for months. Her family had no idea if she was even alive, and that's when Christian Solidarity International stepped in. They worked with trusted local pastors. We talked about they're building these relationships long-term on the ground. That's what's happening there. And so they navigated this situation, and they helped locate where she was being held and then negotiated her release, eventually reuniting her with her family, and then provided long-term care to help her recover from this. These are the sorts of stories that are happening right now. That one was from in the past here recently, but there's stuff like that going on right now. And that is where Christian Solidarity is on the ground and getting involved. And if you feel called to help in this effort, you can get involved. You just go to csi-usa.org. That's csi-usa.org and learn how you can be part of the mission as well. csi-usa.org. And we're going to go to the news in 90 now. A high-profile missing persons case is entering a critical window. The disappearance of Savannah Guthrie's mother has now stretched into its second week, with a reported ransom deadline looming later today. Investigators say a $6 million ransom demand was sent to media outlets. Local Arizona station KGUN9 reported receiving a note threatening the life of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie if a payment isn't made by this afternoon. The note demanded Bitcoin and was later pulled from the station's website. Former FBI officials raised concerns that no verifiable evidence has been produced showing Guthrie is alive, a key element typically seen in ransom kidnappings. The FBI is offering a $50,000 reward and continues vetting ransom messages while following leads across multiple locations. And President Trump sharply criticized the Super Bowl halftime show within minutes of it ending, calling it one of the worst ever and, quote, an affront to the greatness of America. In a Truth Social post, he focused heavily on the fact that headliner Bad Bunny performed entirely in Spanish, saying most viewers couldn't understand the lyrics. And in the same post, he revived his criticism of the NFL's updated kickoff rule, going into some football complaints there as well. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And Billy, obviously the Super Bowl, bazillions of people watch this thing every year. The game itself was kind of lackluster. There wasn't a lot of scoring going on. And then the Seahawks sort of pulled away. It didn't look like there was much of a chance for the Patriots. So the game wasn't all that compelling as it went on. The ads that I saw were so-so. There were a few that made me chuckle, but most of them were kind of meh. But I didn't watch the halftime shows. There were multiple but we actually do the delayed start thing on purpose. So, have a bunch of kids. I'm not going to subject them to these halftime shows. So we just zoom right through it and then pick up the game after we zip through the halftime show. That's how we do it. But, from everything that we're seeing now, it's not in the American language. They're all different country flags being flown around. Just didn't feel like a celebration of America like we've had in the past, to President Trump's point. And then Turning Point USA's All-American halftime show, and that had a lot of viewers on there, at least 5 million concurrent viewers at one point. So a lot of interest, but there were some complaints on that as well. But generally speaking, it was kind of a lackluster night for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, it was boring. And all of it was kind of like, that was kind of just my feeling about it. And this is a big event everybody wants to watch and take part in, but at some point too, it's kind of like, okay, the game itself was boring, but then the halftime shows have just taken on a life of their own in a negative way ever since Janet Jackson. I mean, going back years now, I just feel like they're always looking for attention, trying to drum up controversy, and it's like, this should be a uniting moment. You should find people who people can be safe to watch with their family. The fact that we even have to do this every year and have conversations about it is just silly at this point.
Yeah, it is. And I saw a clip, somebody shared it. It was the Super Bowl after 9/11. So this is only, a few months past 9/11 happening. Obviously the country in a very, sensitive state at that point. You watched it, and you too did that halftime show, and they've had their issues of commentaries over the year, political commentaries, but it was a celebration of America. I mean, just go watch it at some point, just watch a few minutes of it. And it's just stunning to see this sort of celebration of America the way you just can't envision it now, because people seem too cowardly to do it. I mean, you have these Olympians now coming out and complaining about America. They're representing America. And it's like, at what point did people forget that we're a country that has issues and has problems, but it's the promise of America that is incredible, and the hope that America provides so many people that is incredible and is still incredible today and worth celebrating in spite of any flaws that we have. And the fact that people can't recognize that is just starting to get very, very tiresome.
Yeah, it's exhausting, and people are tripping over themselves to say stupid things. And I think really at this point we need to move forward, and we should have people, if you're going to represent America, at the Olympics, focus on the Olympics, take your activism somewhere else, pause it until the games are over at least. I mean, have some respect. That's my view on it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes common sense, but there's apparently short supply of that these days. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And 3 Doors Down frontman Brad Arnold has died after a battle with kidney cancer. Tragic story here. So tell me the details.
Yeah, I mean, tributes are, again, they're pouring in here. Just 47 years old. It's really, really sad. They put out a statement, the band, that said, above all, he was a devoted husband to Jennifer, and his kindness, humor, and generosity touched everyone fortunate enough to know him. Those closest to him will remember not only his talent, but his warmth, humility, faith, and deep love for his family and friends. We had reported last year that he was asking for prayer when he revealed that he had this stage 4 cancer diagnosis. It was earlier on in 2025 that he announced that on his Instagram account. He said he had been diagnosed with clear cell renal cell carcinoma. It's a kidney cancer, and he had sort of fallen ill, gone to the hospital, and had no idea. You think you're sick, you have a cold or something going on. Turns out it was cancer. And he said at the time it had gone into his lungs. It was stage 4, and it was not real good. So from the beginning, he was clear that this was going to be a really difficult diagnosis.
So how do we know about his faith journey?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I had not known a lot about it. I started seeing clips a couple of years ago of him at concerts talking about Jesus. And even when he announced his cancer, he said, he's obviously an outspoken Christian. He said he was trusting the Lord. He said, we serve a mighty God, and he can overcome anything. So I have no fear. I really sincerely am not scared of it at all. And that's what he said when he revealed that he first had it. He had to cancel a summer tour, obviously. He was asking his fans for prayers. He said, I'd love for you to lift me up in prayer. And he concluded by saying, God bless you. So that was one bit of evidence really sort of showing who he is, what he believes. And again, for years at his concerts, you know, we saw him doing these things in August of 2024. Before he announced that he had cancer, before he even had cancer, probably, he was singing at a concert, and he shared the gospel, and he talked about identity. We covered this at the time, and it was really kind of powerful. He said the world surrounds us by a message that we'll never be good enough, we'll never be strong enough, we'll never be beautiful enough, we'll never be rich enough. But he said that this is all a lie, and he called that lie out. He said, "My friends, I just want to take a second to tell you that's an absolute lie. You are loved, you are enough, and you will win. He said, not only can you win, but you will win. You'll always be enough for one reason. That's because Jesus Christ loves you." And so, just a really interesting guy who took his fame and used it to spread the faith.
Yeah. And how did his faith in the midst of this is obviously something, unfortunately, that so many people are dealing with in cancer. How did his faith sustain him in all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really saw, even in that announcement and throughout, he didn't post a ton on social media, but he clearly relied on his faith. When he said he wasn't afraid, I think that was true. I think he went into this, when you're a Christian, you know that life doesn't end here, right? And so it seems like that's what sustained him and guided him, and it was his faith that I think brought him through this, and it probably allowed him to be so open about it. A lot of people, they keep these things secret when they're celebrities and they happen, but he very openly said, I have cancer, I'm struggling, and I want your prayer. And so I think that prayer is what sustained him.
Yeah. And scripture says that Christians, we are the ones who, doesn't mean we don't have grief, but we don't grieve like those who have no hope. And so that is something that when you're dealing with something horrible like cancer or some other illness or deadly fatal disease, it's the perspective of understanding that, yes, it is sad here and this and now on earth for everyone that we lose somebody that we love, that if you're sick with it, you know that you're not going to be here for much longer. That's very, very sad, but you still have hope in eternity. And that is what our faith in Christ gives us. There is something bigger that we're living for. And that is something that in those trials, in the midst of that we can point other people to Christ as well. And so there's a purpose, a deeper purpose, even in those sorts of struggles. And it, again, doesn't mean that you have no grief and that there's no sadness or anything like that. Of course there is, but there is a greater hope there that we can point people towards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we got to keep in mind when these moments happen, because they are painful. Mm-hmm. And the struggles are real.
Amen. All right. Well, our prayers involved for everybody there. And listen, I know everybody is dealing with, in some way, shape, or form, there's somebody you probably know or friends with, a relative, a loved one that is dealing with cancer. It's just horrible and it's everywhere. And so our prayers are with you on that, on this day here on this Monday, kicking off this week. And I encourage everybody else to be praying as well. So appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. And we're going to go to the main thing now, and CBN News and Charlene Aaron caught up with Dr. Tanya Moore, whose testimony went viral after she severed ties with a sorority she was involved in, and longtime ties, and says the decision came down to obedience after a divine warning. Charlene's got more on today's main thing.
First of all, what was it like for you being a Delta, and how long were you involved?
I was a Delta for almost 20 years. I was very involved in the organization, undergrad and graduate chapter as well. It was fun. It was fun. It was, we did all the things, right? So the things that you would see on TV is, partying and hopping around and strolling and all those things. And yes, there was community service as well. And I think that is one of the things that actually becomes the thing that's misleading for many people, because you see it's painted in a positive light, right? And so one does not understand the implications that are happening underneath, especially for Christians.
Wow. Well, you had a pretty life-changing experience when you visited Israel. What happened?
Yes. So I visited Jerusalem and I was there with a ministry group. And when we were there, we took the time to just explore, right? And really follow the life of Apostle Paul, follow the life of Jesus as well. And so we are standing, well, not standing, but sitting in a boat on the Sea of Galilee. And during that time, I had the bright idea to ask the Lord about the storms in my life. Now, at that time, I did not think I had any storms. However, I was in awe of the fact that I was on this Sea of Galilee. And I said, this is where Jesus calmed the storm. I said, God, what storm are you calming in my life? During that time, I began to have a vision. The Lord normally speaks to me through vision. And I began to have a vision of my grandfather. My grandfather has passed away, but as I saw him with a hat on his head and a specifically like a symbol that was on that hat. And the Lord began to show me that that hat, by way of that symbol, had allowed negative spirits to come into our family bloodline. And he began to show me what those things were. And then he showed me what my grandfather's potential was, what he could have been, what he should have been through him. And then he showed me my mother, and he showed me an open door that she had opened, but also showed me her potential. And lastly, he showed me myself. And when I saw myself, I was kneeled down on my knees. I was looking up at a symbol, and the Lord showed me that that was my open door, that it allowed negative spirits to enter into my bloodline. But then he also showed me my potential. Now, here's the thing. The Lord told me, I am closing these doors on your behalf. The only thing is, I only saw two doors close, my grandfather's door and my mother's door.
Wow.
My door was still open. It was as if God was giving me a choice to close that door.
Wow. Well, we're going to get into you renouncing Delta, but you say every Greek organization has a deity, and that
Absolutely.
Delta's is the goddess Minerva.
Correct.
What role, did you see Minerva playing in Delta?
Yeah, so every organization does have a deity, and for Delta it's Minerva. And so when we say Minerva, people think it's a just a term that is lightly used. Well, actually, Minerva is a Roman goddess, right? Likened to the Greek goddess Athena, and so that goddess has meaning. I learned about Greek mythology while I was in Greece on that same trip, and that's one of the things that stood out to me for me to dive deeper into as the Lord began to give me this revelation. And I learned so much because when we think about this, most people say, well, I didn't bow to a Greek god. However, the moment that you took that oath, you did so to a Greek god, right? That deity, that worship that happened is by way of your oath, by way of your ritual, and by way of the hymns that are sang, in this. We see that in most, in all D9 organizations, that what happens is these are not just social service organizations. They're quote unquote founded on Christian principles, right? And we say that word, I say quote unquote because we can say that loosely. Because when you think about it, we're all supposed to worship one God, the true and living God. However, we see rituals, we see oaths, we even see hymns sang to the deity and to the organization. And that goes against the Bible.
Well, Dr. Latanya, you said when you joined that you're talking about these secret oaths, and you recited that that you took part in, and that you also bowed down and kneeled down on a white pillow. What exactly was the oath? And did you understand what they meant at that time?
Yes. So I do not know what the oath was. I have discarded all of the rituals and oaths and things of that nature. And thankful that God actually delivered me from memory recall from even, recalling those things. But a lot of that is public information now that can be searched, right? It's public information now because so much of it has been spread online. However, I will say that the bowing and the kneeling happened at the altar, right? There are candles lit. There's an altar that is set up. And most organizations bow, you put a pillow under your knees and you bow so that you can actually say the oath and sign your name on the dotted line, right? Wow. And so when you think about that overall, one would wonder why an altar is needed to say this oath, or to why bowing is needed to say this oath as well. I'd also like to say that most pledges are very young, right? We are teenagers. I was a teenager. And so you aren't privy to the information prior to joining. So you're basically signing your name on a dotted line without knowing the terms and conditions.
Wow. Well, you eventually denounced ties with Delta, your sorority. What was that process like?
Yes. So the process was pretty easy once I was obedient to God.
So God told you to denounce.
Absolutely.
What did he say to you?
So the door was still open in that same vision. The door was still open, and the Lord began to show me what he had for me. I saw myself, and the person that I saw was not the life that I was living. And it was as if God was giving me a choice. You can choose to continue to be a part of this organization and keep this door open, or you can close that door and receive what I have for you. I believe wholeheartedly that what's happening right now isn't a trend. It isn't something that is just going viral. It is God restoring his covenant. God made a covenant with Abraham, and we are descendants of Abraham. And if we're in a covenant, right, that is opposing to the covenant that we made with the Lord, then we do not have access, right, to God's covenant, because there's opposition there. And so I chose, right, at that moment to move forward to say, I choose to leave this covenant and to be fully one with the true and living God, right? So I sent in my letter. For most people, that includes a lot of grief. For me, it did not include grief. And the reason why is because God showed me where I was going. Imagine God showing you where you were going and then seeing the barrier in the way. Oh my gosh, if you love yourself and you desire your future, you would move that barrier out the way. And that's what I did. I sent a letter in, letting them know that I did not want to be a member. And it's always important to remove your name from the roll. I renounced in private. However, the Lord let me know that was just that was a marriage. That was a separation. Wow. If I really wanted to be out of that covenant, I had to release it by removing my name from the roll. Wow. And that's getting divorced.
All right. Appreciate that there. Very, very fascinating story, and appreciate you bringing that one on the podcast today. That's going to leave us with time for one last thing.
We've got Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. That's an important one when you're struggling and dealing with something like what we talked about today with Brad. You know, we got to pray for his friends and his loved ones, but for all of us to remember this comforting verse.
Yeah, amen. It's what's going to carry you through is God, and it'll be inexplicable to those around, and there's really no other way to explain how can you walk and keep your head up in the midst of these tough situations, only through Christ. That's where we're going to leave it. Get on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. God bless. See you back here tomorrow.